Congratulations to all of you for being selected to what we consider to be the best STEM program that we know of. It's a truly outstanding accomplishment to reach this stage of the program. So what I'd like to do today is tell you a little about, and the name's kind of a little clever ploy on what you'll see in this briefing about the autonomous intelligence that you don't know about. And so before we do that, I will touch a little bit about BAE Systems. So here's an article that was published in Aviation Week in 2018. And this was actually of great surprise to a large number of senior Department of Defense officials, as well as the commercial sector. And essentially this article said that autonomy is ready to enable manned-unmanned combat teaming. And it sort of cataloged the fact that the Department of Defense, and in particular BAE Systems, has been doing autonomy for the Department of Defense for the better part of 2 decades. And interestingly enough, this was rolled out right before the first MIT BWSI speech back in 2018. So by counting, this will be my 3rd time given this briefing, albeit a little more compressed in this fashion. But we went from the Senate building on Capitol Hill, where there was the rollout of this Mitchell Institute paper, right to campus to give this speech. So really pleased to do this for the 3rd time. So a little about BAE Systems. I know it's not necessarily a company that's well known. We are a worldwide company. We build aircraft, we build electronics that go in aircraft, we build nuclear submarines, nuclear aircraft carriers, and ships of all shapes and sizes. We are the largest producer of combat vehicles in the world. So we are the #1 combat vehicle producer, certainly for the United States military. And we also have a vibrant cyber business. So when I said worldwide, we are truly worldwide, 87,000 employees and over located in 40 countries with customers in 80 countries. In the United States, we have employees in every single state. And we have major facilities in 31 of the 50 states. So pretty big presence here in the US. And as was mentioned, Fast Labs. So where's that name come from? Well, if you take a look, each of the letters within Fast Labs, it acknowledges a heritage R&D organization that was acquired over time that forms the modern day BAE Systems in the US, and then ultimately Fast Labs. And as was mentioned, if you look at the A, I entered into BAE Systems in the fall of 2004 under AlphaTech. And we'll touch on that in 2 slides a little more. So what does Fast Labs do? Fast Labs has got the incredible opportunity to solve some of the nation's toughest technical challenges, and oftentimes decades ahead of the commercial sector. And what you're going to see in this briefing today is one of those areas is autonomy. And again, an area that AlphaTech to BAE Systems Fast Labs has been a leader in the Department of Defense for 20 years now. So, but before I want to move on, I did want to acknowledge, especially today, with Dr. Athens, will have his memorial service this evening, for which many of his former students and colleagues will be joining. So Professor Athens was a professor of mine. He was a mentor of mine. He was the co-founder of AlphaTech, one of 5 professors from MIT, and I consider him a great friend. So he'll definitely be missed by many. Okay, so what I like to do with each briefing is start off with a working definition, because that word autonomy is a loaded word. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So for the purposes of this briefing, autonomous unmanned air vehicle is an unmanned air vehicle capable of navigating and achieving a mission objective without remote piloted control. And we have some examples here listed below. So RQ-4, that's the Global Hawk, first flew in 1998, has logged over 400,000 hours. X-45, a program that's not well recognized and understood today, First flew in 2002 and was designed where dozens, we're talking 4, 8, 16, all the way up to 30, 36 vehicles would operate as a team swarming to achieve a mission. And then Perdix, which is well known to the BWSI, was first flew in 2014 where they released 100 of these vehicles that did fly in formation. So what we would normally do pre-COVID is we would have a series of questions and the audience would yell out, you know, which A, B, or C is the answer to the question. So first question, when was the first autonomous UAV flight in history? Right, again, the working definition. So we've got A, B, C, and D. And I don't know, Jennifer, if anyone is chatting yet with what their answer is, but I'm going to roll the tape given that we are compressed for time here. So I did just show you Global Hawk. Lots of C's?
Lots of
all right,
C's.
So, all right, so 1980s would be the advent of the cruise missile for the United States military. But if we went back a little further, the V1 buzz bomb, right, met this criteria. But if you guessed B, C, or D, you were actually wrong. The first example goes all the way back to World War I. And if you go to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, to the museum there, you'll see the Kettering Bug. And so this was, let's see, how many years after the first flight? So first flew in 1918, so 15 years after the first flight. This was actually done in conjunction with the Wright brothers. They designed this. So this autonomous unmanned air vehicle is capable of flying 40 miles, navigating, and hitting a target fully autonomously. So, you know, so the question then goes as to how is it that back in World War I, we had autonomous UAVs, but artificial intelligence, which is what is all the rage with autonomous cars and you name it, only came online in the late 50s, and we're now only in the third wave. So how is it that autonomy existed prior to the field of artificial intelligence? And the answer is this. I kind of already showed my hand, goes back to Professor Athens. It's control theory. And it's something that's not well understood. And as we started developing this technology and having to explain this to senior Department of Defense leaders, what we learned very quickly is that if you go to the Air Force Academy, golf is mandatory, but taking control theory courses, which govern the flight of every aircraft that we have today, is not. And so we found ourselves having to speak about what is feedback control to a pretty big audience. So step one, everyone has one. That's the governing principle of how your brain operates. We went ahead and the first known feedback control system dates 50 years after Alexander the Great died, and it was a water clock. We came up with an example of what we consider the most well-known feedback control system, since everyone has one in addition to their brain, is a thermostat. And then from the aerospace sciences, what we've shown is that ever since the dawn of flight, flight controls have been governed by feedback control. And I'll share one example here, going back to 1912. Lawrence Sperry of the Sperry Corporation, they built gyros for battleships. Lawrence Sperry miniaturized that gyro, put it into a plane, and in 1912 developed the first wing leveler autopilot, which we call navigation augmentation. You'll see that. And at an air show outside of Paris, before there was a Paris air show, Lawrence Sperry turned the autopilot on, jumped out of the cockpit, and no one else was flying, and walked out of the wing and waved at the audience. Walked back in, got in the cockpit, turned the plane around, turned the autopilot, and then went by the crowd on the opposite wing, right? And again, 1912. Unfortunately, he did die in a plane accident later. But what you see is that feedback control has been with the aerospace sciences for a long, long time. So what I had to do back, and I mean a long, long time ago, was come up with an example of how it all works and explain this into what we call fighter talk. So here's my house in Arlington. It looks a little different now, but still same house in Arlington, Massachusetts. And that is now my 18-year-old daughter standing at the front door. You can barely see her there. And as you can see, we get a lot of snow in Boston. And so here's how a thermostat works. So we desire to keep our house at 68 degrees in the middle of winter. But as I'm shoveling snow, my daughter likes to keep on opening up that door and letting cold air in. And so this thermostat, right, is constantly measuring fluctuations due to the fact that my daughter is opening the door, and there's night and there's day and there's all the different cycle. So a thermostat measures the house temperature, right? It has a thermocouple, which makes noisy measurements. It sends that desire, or what the actual measurement is, to the thermostat, but the thermostat desires 68 degrees. So it determines a delta in the temperature. And when it gets too low, it then sends a signal, low voltage signal, to the thermos, which ignites the thermos, and the thermos adds heat in the house. And this process continues until the house temperature rises to 68 degrees. So you are going to receive a module here about classical control, as this is part of a lot of your student projects. And so I'm going to take this example. I'm not going to put it into classical control problem. So my house is called a plantor process, right? My desire to keep this at 68 degrees is called the performance measurement. And the fact that there is temperature fluctuations outside, as well as the door opening and closing, is called disturbance or noise. The thermocouple acts as a sensor, right? And it happens to be embedded in the thermostat. And the furnace acts as an effector. And the ability of a thermostat to take these noisy measurements and come up with the estimate of what the belief is of the temperature at the thermostat is the estimator. And then to do the calculation, should I turn the furnace on or not, is called the controller. And the fact that I set it to 68 degrees is called the reference signal. And in feedback control, this continuously works. So here's some of the benefits of why you have feedback control, right? On the left, this is one of the original reasons on why feedback control, because thermostats, they used to have people that would control the airflow to a furnace and shovel coal. And so the notion of this is that feedback control throughout the Industrial Revolution reduced workload, reduced repetitive tasks, danger to humans, and closes the loop faster than humanly possible. But when you take classical control, you'll find out that there is theoretical proofs that support, that despite your plant variation and how well you understand it, feedback control makes you more robust to that. So think about this. The same thermostat that Honeywell sells works in the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, works during the summer, works during the winter, works for all different shapes and sizes of homes, works for all different shapes and sizes of furnaces. So those are all plant variations. The disturbances works during the summer, winter. What you'll see is that when you command 68 degrees in your house, it drives it to 68, not 66 and not 75. And then ultimately what you'll see is that it theoretically proved that it will drive it to the temperature desire as quick as possible. So how does this apply to UAVs? So if we take the plant and the process, this becomes the aircraft, and the effectors and sensors become the mission systems that are on there. And then since we're looking at multiple vehicles that operating as a team, all in a battle space surrounded by other things, the plant and the process essentially becomes this networked battle space. The performance measure that you desire is, your objective is to go find targets, do surveillance on them, and so on, right, as a team. And the mission uncertainty is called the fog of war, right? Aircrafts could fail, or you could be shot down. So you have an operator somewhere, right? Could be in a cockpit if it's a manned, unmanned teaming, or somewhere else in the battle space. And you have a series of measurements coming from all different vehicles, including spacecraft and undersea vehicles anywhere. And then you have to give commands to all these vehicles. Where do they fly and what do they do and how do they use their sensors and payloads? So all of this is then done in a similar fashion. You have to be able to fuse all this information, and you have to make decision-making in real time. But you also have to recognize is that in warfare, there is someone like chess trying to defeat your actions. And they have their own intent, and they have their own feedback, and they make their own decisions while you do that. So one of the things that we did is that we employed a timescale separation. If we closed our loop faster than our adversary appears static in the purposes of our planning. And that is the problem we solved starting back in 2000 is when we started working on this problem. And if you take a look here, we see this as a logical progression in the aerospace sciences. I've got the list there. They did not occur in that order. If you take a look at the autopilot, as I said, that was in World War I. As you went to World War II, we went to control augmentation. In the 70s, from the research that Dr. Athens supported in the 60s, we went to stability augmentation, and then the final loop to be closed would be mission effectiveness augmentation. And so this is what we started to develop. A key point that we'd like to make here is that this is not a script. This is not a if-then series of algorithms. And the story I will tell you is that was the original intent. The original approach to doing autonomy for these classes of problems was during the second wave of artificial intelligence. And in that particular case, what they attempted to do is try to numerically list all of the different tactics that would be applied, and then essentially do like what Google does now and do reinforced learning and make it an expert system. The government spent probably about $500 million going down that approach. And the problem is that in warfare, if you optimize your performance against the last war, you're almost guaranteed to lose the next one. And going back to that notion of robustness, our approach that we took at Alpha Tech in 2000 was to apply flight control paradigm using optimal control, where we did a constant optimization of maximizing our mission effectiveness while trying to minimize that of our adversary. So what control decisions need to be made? You got to determine where vehicles are going to fly, what activities, what sensor you're going to turn on and when, who's going to turn the sensor on, how they're going to do it, what's the orientation, because you have mountains, you have terrain, you've got trees, and then where this is all going to be done. Recognizing in the process of doing that, you're being shot at. So the key dynamics, physics does matter, as does math in these problems. So air vehicle, the physics of the air vehicles, the sensors, the weapons, the concept of operations, the rules of engagement. There's a lot of legalities around these type of things, and you have to be able to account for it. And then there's all the uncertainty, weather being the simplest of them all, right? You never have accurate weather predictions for aircraft that are flying around the world. So to our next question. So we talked about single vehicle autonomy. When was the first multi-vehicle flight in history? All right, and I've given you a couple of dates here. And Jennifer, I'll let you tell me what you believe the consensus arrives at.
There's a variety, but I think A. We also have one other question.
Sure, let's jump in.
So I think the question was surrounding how effective some of the techniques you're discussing are in like guerrilla warfare. Sorry.
So this is to date has been very much targeted towards strategic air power. So we're talking, the X-40 plane like X-45 is it's an F-16 sized aircraft. So think of F-16s and bigger is really the sweet spot for this technology. We haven't necessarily applied this type of approach to soldiers on the ground. So good question. So we mentioned this one earlier, 2014, right? Hundreds, but this is the winner. So Global Hawk in 1998 has been a single vehicle operation all along, but it was the UCAF program, which was the first one to actually fly two vehicles cooperatively in the air, fully autonomous. And the most important thing is that they did not hit each other. You can't underestimate, though the sky is very big, when you fly 8 miles per minute at 35, 40,000 feet, bad things can happen, believe it or not, very quickly. So to kind of back up the, what I'm saying with regards to the development here, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the first contract for multi-vehicle, and the title of it was Distributed Cooperative Control of Tactical Autonomous Teams. First contract let for this is 2001, first publication 2001, and then a whole series of publications after that. Okay, so how do you solve a big problem like this? This is in the category of problems called non-polynomial hard, which means that you cannot determine whether or not you have an optimal solution, and there is no test. Even if you can find a solution, there's no guarantee that it's optimal. So this problem set is called the Markov decision problem, where you're constantly balancing the trade-off of immediate reward versus future reward. And think about this, that if you fly all the way north, with the anticipation of finding something interesting, you're burning fuel. And when you burn fuel, right, especially to get up, to get up to a northern target as quick as possible, you may have regrets that something may pop up in the south and you are no longer in the position. So you're constantly doing this trade-off between what value I can collect right now versus hedging for uncertainty. So the optimal solution to do that is stochastic dynamic programming. But as Bellman identified these problems, so he was the founder of stochastic dynamic programming in the late 50s, is that you suffer from the curse of dimensionality. And it's at the very, very bottom there. And the reality is that for the class of problems we're talking about, there is no compute power, even if you assumed quantum computing, right? 20 years from now, right? You're only probably arriving at, I'm going to guess, 1,000th of the compute power to solve these type of problems. So these problems are some of the toughest known. So an alternative to that is an approximation approach that we successfully applied to this problem. It's called Approximate dynamic programming. And this was founded by Professor Dimitri Bersakis from MIT, and again, another professor of mine and one of the employees of AlphaTech. And instead of trying to do every state going forward in a dynamic programming problem, this one you only consider the current state you're in, and you come up with approximations of what that future value is, and which is a pretty clever approach. And then you use feedback control, and let's say that you generate a plan for only the next, let's say, 2 hours. You implement the plan, and then you update it again in, let's say, 5 minutes, or it could be all the way every minute that you update that. And so that is the approach that we applied to make this problem tractable, but still an extremely large and difficult problem to solve. So I've talked a lot about control theory, but the question is that where does artificial intelligence fit into all this? So as I said earlier, situational awareness is really, so in the field of control and estimation theory, situational awareness is bent into the estimation theory, right, side of it, and the control theory goes into the decision making. But if you get a PhD from MIT, you will get a PhD in estimation and control theory, which covers both of these, right? And so what you'll see here is that for situational awareness, and this would be where Professor Alan Wilsky, and again, a professor from and a co-founder of AlphaTech, had a heavy hand in the situational awareness in a problem that is called the all-source track and ID fuser. The decision-making, the control theory is part of the MEAS is the multi-vehicle mission control system. But what we have identified is that there is a role for AI in this. And one of the interesting things about this problem is that if you want to search a very, very large area, estimation and control theory will give you sort of a distribution map of where to go search. And if you don't have any intelligence, it basically weights everything equally. However, if you use AI, right, and you use the ability of that to parse, years and years worth of data to discover patterns, it can actually influence those distribution maps to say, hey, based upon prior behavior of this part of the world, I recommend you look here first. And that's an area for which artificial intelligence is really shining, is doing that pattern discovery, event alerts, and behavioral characteristics. So we have adapted our architecture, in fact, to include AI, and we have very high TRL capabilities to support that as well. So recognizing time, right, and I've cut out kind of the middle section of how each of these blocks were solved, right, and, you know, things around that. So I did want to kind of say, so where is this technology? It touched on earlier, yeah, hasn't been used for guerrilla warfare, but from the air domain, it is expanding to space and as well as expanding to undersea. And we call this cross-domain or multi-domain applications. So this technology is in fact being used either in modeling or actual exercises today that span space to undersea. The Army's got great interest in this. In fact, all services do. The next one is that the problems we have solved to date on the control side really handle around 36 entities simultaneously, which is a very, to exquisite detail to no end. But the big push is to take that to thousands. As I said, you know, the approach we've used to date was to close the loop faster than our adversary and use a timescale separation. We recognize that our adversaries are very intelligent and determined as well. And this technology is 20 years old now for the Department of Defense, so it would be realistic for our adversaries to be bringing this to the battle space as well. Next, cyber resilience. Boy, when we first started this back in 2000, this was not a thing we worried about, but today this is at the central focus. And then, you know, verification and validation. We have taken a very traditional AI-based approach. You hear about this, can you trust autonomy? Well, with our control theoretic-based approach, we use the same flight test protocols that have been used in the aerospace science now for over 100 years. But it's both costly and time-consuming, but it is an approach that works and is well understood. As we bring AI into this, we will have to re-engage in what the implications are and how you do verification and validation, as there are no known approaches today for AI in the realm of aerospace science and guaranteeing safety. So with that, I'm open to some questions.
All right, Jerry, that's great. I have a few questions that came in a little earlier. One was, not to drag you back too far, but what was the Kettering Bug used for?
It was a flying torpedo. Literally, it was a torpedo.
Going after ships?
No, ground targets.
Ground targets,
so,
okay.
So if you look at the bunkers and those type of things, the trenches of World War I, it was designed to hit those or actually go into the rear areas and go after ammunition depots and those type of things. But it was literally a torpedo that they put wings and a propeller on it. Good question.
How do you think some of this technology can be used for civilian aircraft?
So, you know, interesting enough, let's start off with autonomous cars. Let's go there. Professor Emilio Frizzoli was a lab mate of mine, and he was the founder of Autonomy. And so he took this similar based approach and came forward with a control theory based approach to self-driving cars. And there's two camps right now in the self-driving cars. There's the AI approach, is what Google and Uber and all of them are using. And then you have a series of companies like Autonomy that got bought by Delphi. So the idea is that you're going to have multiple autonomous cars on the streets. It's a different structured environment than flying at 40,000 feet, but that's one application. One would think that as we go to the autonomous taxis, the Ubers, the Embraers, there's a whole series of companies, that this technology actually would be very, very applicable. But this technology does not have a see and avoid, right? Generally speaking, for the class of assets we have, we pretty much know exquisitely where they're at with the INSs, and we don't have to worry about birds at 40,000 feet. There's all these things that we don't have to worry about that you do have to worry about if you want to have a flying taxi in the urban environment, right? Not just buildings, but things like birds. And if you have a collision, you're going to fall from the sky very quickly, and you could then harm someone on the ground. So yes, there is applicability, but extensions would definitely be required for that level of safety to be that close to densely populated areas. So good question.
Sounds great. What kind of issues may arise if you supply military equipment worldwide to potentially warring countries? I imagine this is a question that the DoD industry needs to wrestle with regularly. What are your thoughts there?
In terms of exportability to our allied nations?
So I think the question is, yeah, pretty broad.
Yeah. So this is definitely a technology that the United States is not comfortable with exporting abroad. And so, a lot of protections have been put in place that allow us to have this talk today. It's not by coincidence that this was not well known until 2018, that this technology, and it was really a push once the autonomous car companies were making the progress that the nation was comfortable in discussing, this technology, and its heritage with the Department of Defense. So this is, as you would imagine, pretty protected type of technology here. A lot goes into that.
Sure. So what excites you most about the future of control systems?
Well, that's every sort of major step forward since the Industrial Revolution, right? Control theory has gone hand in hand. And so I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And I think that what does excite me the most about the opportunity with control theory is when I went to school, right, there was the control theory camp, and then there was the artificial intelligence camp. And we were separated on campus. We didn't talk to each other. And, I've kind of made a few jokes here and there in this talk about that. What excites me is that the two communities have an opportunity to actually merge the technologies. It's not an either or. I think that there are strengths and weaknesses of control theory. It doesn't scale well to large problems, where AI scales very well to large problems. But if a small perturbation, you could have a dramatic different outcome. So to me, if I really look at it, it would be truly the merger of those two fields into sort of a united approach. And the possibilities that provides for our world, I think, are only left to the imagination of those people who can dream.
That's great. Can you discuss a little bit how you're dealing with human-machine interactions within your control theory framework?
Yeah, so, if I take a look at this and say, historically, if you're a pilot and you see this type of technology, you're not all that interested in this type of technology, right? And so because you're kind of doing the pilot's job, right, if you're worried about flying a plane. But this is where the notion of a pilot could be sort of a quarterback, not just the pilot. And so for the 20 years of doing this, it's been a constant tension back and forth of what do you allow the optimization do versus the pilot. So there's this notion of variable level of autonomy, and it's well documented that, sometimes they have these categories. I've kind of lost track of all the different categories, but the reality is that humans always in charge, and so the human's going to dictate to the algorithm what they're going to permit the algorithm to do, autonomous. And so the human-machine interaction has got to be, you've got to take, whatever the guidance is. So you may let the aircraft fly anywhere within a predefined airspace, which you'll define that. You may allow it to turn, to take EOIR pictures of anything, but you may not let it transmit, right? Let alone do weapon release without an operator being, the final decision maker for that. But it's all variable. And so you have to be able to accommodate for any particular day, any particular mission, what they want to do. and be ready to support the rules of engagement for whatever they are. And so it goes back and forth. And now, aside from those in fact become constraints to the overall problem that you have to accommodate. Now the question is that how, with the amount of data that these algorithms crunch, what do you show an operator? What's the right level of fidelity of that data? And will they trust it, right? And so there's been a tremendous amount of work done by companies like Produco and others that are not control, or Aptima, right? These are not the control theory companies. These are companies that specialize in human-machine interactions, right? And so that's where you again bring in a different skill set to help solve the problem. But it is still, I would say, to this day, it's an evolving. You don't have, I think Dr. Roper will talk about wanting the Waze app, right? For these, we're not there yet, right, as an industry.
Right. So switching gears a little bit, is BAE, did you always envision yourself working for a company like BAE? Can you maybe talk a little bit about your professional background and aspirations?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a whole different speech. But
maybe the elevator pitch.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be able to work in the aerospace industry. I originally wanted to be an astronaut and a pilot. That didn't work out. The Berlin Wall had fallen. But I've worked in 2 startup companies. I've worked in large companies like McDonnell Douglas that became Boeing. As you said in my bio, I've spent some time working in the government, and here I am in a big company. So I do like to jump around and do different things. But in the speech I give, kind of sort of where I came from, and I came from an inner city environment for those that, and I've been told the speech is out there, by the way. People have approached me that I didn't even know that have seen the speech I've given at the reception. But I encourage people to take risks throughout life. I call it professional cliff diving. If you're in a comfort zone, go seek something different, and that's certainly what I've done throughout my career. I've been very fortunate and very lucky because I do believe half of life is luck, and to get to work on some of these just amazingly cool people with these, some of the people I've met and I've worked with are just absolutely amazing. So very fortunate in my career.
That's great. What advice would you give some of our students about, if they're really interested in controls and autonomy and AI? What are some things, as a rising senior, soon to go to college, what are some things that might help them?
Yeah, so my number one piece of advice would be dream big. I have a saying: if you dream big and you don't fully make it there, you'll make it a lot further than if you dream small. So go big, not small. So I do have a premise here. What we're talking about here is pretty wild stuff. And if you took yourself back 20 years and recognizing that for rising seniors, you were not born when we started this. This started off with, hey, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do this? And, we were fighting a tide that, only AI could solve this. And so I'll say that, what you're able to achieve in life is only limited by your ability to dream. And did this work out exactly like we thought it would? No. I mean, I would have fully expected us to field this in, mid 2000s, right? It took a lot longer to field than what we ever imagined. But that's where I'd go, is dream big. And the bigger the dream, you never know what the possibilities. Most founders that start companies, it just starts with a dream. And they start off doing something, and then they uncover something else, and the way they go, and the next thing you know, they're, multimillionaires, right, on TV. So dream big.
Jen, can I just interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
So Jerry, if you take a quick look at the students in the pictures, they're all holding up something special that they weren't able to do in person, but they have received the backpacks from BAE.
Great.
And we just want to say thank you, as always, for all the work you guys do to help us prepare for BWSI.
Yeah, we're glad to help. So we're looking for future scientists and engineers from this group, right? So we need you.
Jerry, is there going to be internships?
You know, I don't know. COVID has got a lot of us sort of in a tailspin. So last year, all of those internships that we offered are on hold right now. So I suspect we're in a holding pattern. I don't know, Lou, if you've got an update on what's going on with regards to the internships.
I do. Actually, Doogie and I spoke this morning relative to Cheryl, and she's all for it. And if we can make that happen for next year, barring any other issues, we'd like to see some of the students come in and do some internship for us.
Great.
Great.
So we'll figure out what that looks like in the coming weeks.
Great. So students watch for notices from us about internships for possibilities from BAE for next summer.
Excellent. So we've got maybe about 5 more minutes. I'm gonna ask sort of the tough question in the room, and maybe the something to keep us thinking about autonomy. What do you see as some of the ethical issues using this advanced technology in a warfare environment? I think that might be back of everyone's mind, and not sure anyone's willing to ask, so I will.
Yeah, no, that's a question I field every speech on this topic, every campus I go to. So here's kind of the basic premise, the way we look at this. If this technology is possible, right, we could sit there and say, you know, for the democratically led governments, hey, we're not going to do this. But what history has shown, right, is that when the technology is there and can be used in warfare, it will be used. And if you choose not to, history has shown over and over again that your adversary will, to great effect. So we look at this as, you know, and one of the reasons why we talk about this is deterrent, right? We don't desire, right, the use of this technology, but it is important for us to have deterrents like this, such that, you know, for those adversaries that want to, you know, prohibit democrat countries from their freedom, you know, their way of life and their freedoms in life, then they got to know that we have this in our arsenal, right? And they may as well, but they know it will be a counter on counter. And so that's the unfortunate truth about what I would consider would be the history of mankind, because like it or not, you open up the history books and the history is dominated by warfare since the written history of Homer.
All right, Jerry, I can't thank you enough for coming here today and giving us such a great talk, inspiring the students. And so again, let me everyone's thanks. So at this point, I think we're ready to transition to our next speaker.
Oh, Jen,
who is,
yes. Present Jerry's t-shirt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness. Yes.
So at this time, we are going to have David Han and Ria Cena from Cogworks. This is students in the class at BAE is the sponsor of. So there's Ria.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank you for sending us the backpacks. It was definitely very exciting to receive that in the mail a couple weeks ago. And additionally, thank you so much for your talk today and for being here with us. I really enjoyed every part of your presentation, and especially the interactive portions and questions that you included. Particularly, I also loved how you connected feedback control back to thermostats, and that really helped put the rest of your talk in work with the MEAS software and perspective. So thank you again for the backpacks and for your wonderful talk today.
Yeah, you're
I would
welcome, and
also
thank
like
you.
to say thank you for so much for the backpacks. I didn't even expect that to come in the mail. And we all appreciated your talk on autonomous UAVs. And I would like to also particularly mention that I really enjoyed your talk on feedback control. That also hit me a lot too, especially with the thermostats.
Great, thank you as well. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to drop off. You've got actually the star of the show is coming up with Francesca. So I'll hand it off to Francesca now. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Okay, everyone. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Francesca Scire Scapuzzo. She's going to talk a lot about her background. So I'm just going to hit a couple of the highlights and then let her get started. She's currently the Senior Director of Advanced Technology and Innovation at the BAE Fast Labs. She has a PhD from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, a master's degree from MIT, and a master's degree and bachelor's degree from the University of Catania, Italy. Sorry for that. She has a very varied background. She's held positions as faculty member in Italy, as well as senior scientist and CEO. And so she has just a fantastic presentation to share with you today. So with that, Francesca, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So I was asked to share my story. So I will share my career and personal life, and I'll give three main messages. And here you have that: determination, flexibility, and purpose. Sometimes determination and flexibility seem opposite to each other. However, sometimes you have to be flexible and take some risk and change your position in order to get to your ultimate purpose. So I'll talk about these through experiences. So let me start with a little bit about my childhood. So here is me in the 70s. I'm not going to say because I don't want to give up my age. But in my life, I've always been very curious. And so the story of this picture, according to my parents, is that there was the mayor of the city of Catania was giving a speech, and I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, so I kept on going in front and standing in front of the cardinal, in front of the military, in front of everybody else. And the cardinal asked me, "Do you want to sit here in front of us?" And I said, "Yeah." And so here I am sitting and being very intent, not being shy because I was curious. And so this is something that I really encourage: be always curious and don't be afraid to ask questions and to put yourself in front if you have a question. So I start from my high school. So as you can see from now, what I talk about is I was born in Catania in Sicily, and I went to an all-girls Catholic high school. And in Italy, we have three main directions you can study for high school: classic study, scientific study, or linguistic studies. So my parents chose for me, and so I studied ancient Greek, Latin, philosophy, history, and literature. So that's how I started. And I loved it. And I loved philosophy, I loved literature. But when it came to the time to choose to go to college, I said, I want to study engineering because I want to understand real life. I'm tired of just words. I want real experience, and I want to see physics. I want to see numbers. And so everybody told me that I was out of my mind because they said, "But you don't have the background and you're a woman. How are you going to deal with that? It's going to be really hard." And the answer to that was, I agree, I don't have the background, but that doesn't mean I cannot learn. And I understand that it's going to be hard, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to succeed. So just fast forwarding to my first degree. So I went and studied electrical engineering at the University of Catania. And I graduated on top of my class, summa cum laude, with this thesis that was one of my passions. So one of my passions has always been innovation, high tech, and space. I've always been fascinated in space. So my thesis focused on synthetic aperture radars. And what I did, I simulated the attitude error of a space shuttle, which is roll, pitch, and yaw, for the SAR image. So this comes from a long history. So the space shuttle, when I grew up, was a very exciting new program from NASA, because it was the first time we built reliable, less expensive, reusable rockets that were not just disposable. So that was a great excitement. So first launch 81, then an unfortunate space shuttle Challenger accident in 86. And then it took a while until we were ready to go back to space in 94, 2003, 2006, 2011. And now, very exciting, in 2020, we had the SpaceX launch, Falcon 9, fully autonomous, with 2 astronauts delivered to the International Space Station. So very exciting. So the first message I wanted to share is determination, meaning do not let others tell you, you're not good at this, you can't do it, it's hard. Because there are a lot of reasons why people might say that. It might be a bias, unconscious bias, can be discrimination, stereotype, or just lack of confidence. So don't let that discourage you. You find your dream. Jerry was saying, big dream big. Find your passion, believe in yourself, and work hard, put your heart on it, and do it. And take risks. My big motto in life has been, failing is better than not trying. If you don't try, you know you're not gonna get to your goal. So that's the first message. Then I went to MIT, I did my master's, and I work on global positioning systems. And what I did, I developed a system to estimate errors, multiple errors in GPS from the signal to noise ratio without a priori information. And so I came to the US as a foreign student with an F1 visa. So then after that, I follow different research programs, and I found, I got very passionate about the research that professor was following up in Zurich. And that was about a different way of using GPS. And that's part of curiosity and innovation. So usually you know how GPS works. So you know the position of the satellite, and you find your position on the ground. However, there is a noise in between, which is the atmosphere, that inserts an error in your position. So the idea of GPS in atmospheric science is, how do we actually reverse that? Let's suppose we know exactly where we are on the ground, and we know exactly what the position in space. So the error in between is the atmospheric error. So from that, we can gather a lot of very important information, including water vapor content in the atmosphere, which you can use for weather prediction and global climate change studies. So to me, this was very exciting. And so took measurement at the Jungfraujoch in Switzerland. So I've been to this beautiful site, a very windy place, and I've been in Mount Washington gathering measurements for this research. So after that, I was a postgraduate student at European Space Agency. It was a very exciting experience. What I did there, I participated to the creation of a new program, which was the MIMR, the Multi-Frequency Imaging Microwave Radiometer. That was the first European microwave radiometer that was following the American SMI radiometer. So my goal was to try to define which frequency are the best frequency to do observation, remote sensing from space. So exciting experience, made international friends. This experience really opened my mind, and I worked with amazing scientists at world level. Another exciting experience. So I'm saying all that because traveling and experiencing different things is always something that makes you grow personally and professionally. So after European Space Agency, I got this scholarship to attend the International Space University in Japan for 10 weeks. It's a summer program focused on space application. As you see, 134 students, 29 countries. What I learned is how difficult it is even for scientists to communicate across cultures. We were working on programs in very diverse teams, and communication and way people interact in different culture really made it really hard for us to perform in the program. So this is something to think about, different culture, international experience. So, but we're talking about my dream. So my dream was always innovation, research. So my dream was to become a professor and also go back to University of Catania, give back to my students, give back to the universities. And so you can see, so I was teaching electromagnetic wave theory and microwaves. And electromagnetic wave theory is a second year class that all the electrical engineers have to take mandatory. So you can see the room was full. We had over 200 students for that. And so I did that, and I got tenure in 95, and I had this position for 7 years. And I love this position, and I experienced many different things, including being visiting scientist for a period to do some measurement, GPS calibration. So again, with the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. So at this point, though, I was in a stage of life where I start thinking about, so what am I doing? So what I thought is, so first of all, innovation. I've always thought about innovation. Innovation is a complex process, and it is the process of transforming a new idea that comes from a need into a product that brings value. So just having an idea, a patent, a paper, a publication, this is not innovation. It's just an idea. It's not innovation until it becomes a product that goes into the market and bring a benefit to society. So the best example is electric light, right? Where Edison didn't discover electric light. It was discovered 50 years before, and it took 50 years to make it a product, the process of commercialization. So at that point, I wanted to really see my research, not just on paper, but do things in the real world. So I decided, another crazy decision of mine, to go from academia to industry. So I came to the US, J1 visa, and start working in small business. And again, as you can imagine, a lot of people said, this is a crazy decision. You're leaving a tenure position to do something without certainty. So that's a big risk that I took for sure. But what I did, working in small business and doing R&D in small business in the US, that I had the opportunity through different government contracts to develop antenna systems, air, and some patents. So I had a lot of opportunities, and I really enjoy the experience of doing hardware development, test, and see my my discover or my idea becoming real product in real life. So the second message here is flexibility. So be curious, be open-minded, and think about, you have a dream. So your dream is a certain passion you have, innovation, high tech, but the dreams can evolve with you as you grow personally and professionally. So I thought, I want to be a professor. Yes, that's one way to fulfill this dream, but there are many other ways. And so this is an example. So Jerry just talked about feedback control, right? So that's exactly an application of that, where you have a performance metric, which is your dream. We say, have a big dream. So you have a metric, and then during your life, you have a number of noises happening. There is noise that happen. It can be COVID-19. It can be the Berlin Wall for Jerry. It can be personal growth, things that change in our life, things that happen to us. And so we have to adjust. And you can apply Markov decision problem or new other ways to adjust to your decision to get to a certain point through your situational awareness and make a decision on how to go forward. Now, of course, at one point, I'm always restless. I want to always think about the next big thing to do. My being in Boston, the 5th best place in the world to start a company, I said I had to start a company. I had a number of patents, and so I decided to start a company based on the patents I had developed under government contract. So I started a company on the tech in Cambridge. And then something interesting happened. My dream was to have an impact in society, innovation. And what I understood is that the most impact that I could have on the market or the industry is working on a large corporation. So actually, my switch from a small business to BAE system, it was because of this goal of having an impact in society, doing something that really changed the industry. And so for me, working at BAE system, I could make a change in the defense and aerospace industry. So I worked in this corporation working with brilliant people. And so you learn from BAE system employees every day because they are all brilliant employees. I'm always at the forefront of rapid innovation with new ideas, and you can apply it because there are resources, because we have amazing leadership that is really on board with innovation. And you can go across all different fields. So what I enjoy of the position I have right now as a lead of Tech Scouts is that I'm not focused only on the small electromagnetic world. I work on a number of different fields: electronics, cyber, AI, autonomy, robotics, sensing, and so on. So it broadened my horizon. And then I can work and collaborate with universities. I was a professor, so I feel very close to university. Small business, I know what it means to be in small business. Startup, I know how hard it is to be a startup, to do pitch, to work and present to VCs. And now I'm in a large corporation. So that's definitely something that I'm enjoying. So I always tell my kids that I'm very lucky because I've been paying to have a lot of fun. So that's the advantage of my experience. And so the last point in my message is purpose. So many times we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like, to me, this is the wrong question. The question is, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to accomplish? What is your role, and what's the difference you want to make in the world? And then you do things that allow you to do that. So to make this difference, you might need to update your dream. Remember, I said your career could change. You can change, you mature, you understand more. There are new opportunities. So you have to do that feedback control all the time to see what are the new information that can come in and help me in improving my chance to fulfill my dream. And find something that fit the stage of your life, but always keep in mind your ultimate goal, which is your dream, your passion. And I think that was the time that was given to me. So,
Francesca, that was a great talk. It's a really impressively broad background. I know we've met and talked a couple times in the past, but I never really fully understood where you came from. It's very impressive. I was actually in Catania about 2.5 years ago. It's a beautiful city in a beautiful country. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions here in the chat from a number of the students. Great. So I'm going to try to get the students to unmute and ask the question themselves. There were several questions having to do with your background, your non-traditional background coming to engineering. So I think the first of those questions was from, is it Saya Kim Suzuki?
Hi, yeah, Saya. So you said that you studied classics in high school, and I was wondering how that informed your work in the future in engineering and innovation.
Oh, this is an excellent question. because many times when I was a professor, some of my students would say, I don't want to write because, you know, that's why I wanted to be an engineer, because I hate writing. I hate having to put things in words. And I have to say my classical studies, philosophy and literature, and the logic that I learned from the Greek classics helped me every day for writing proposals. I was very successful writing proposal. And even though English is not my first language, I of course write better in Italian. The way I could put the structure in and it enabled me to be clear in the way I express my concept. And I've been very, very successful in proposal writing. So that was really important to me. So one, it was the proposal writing from a practical point of view. The other thing is understanding people. So as engineers, we tend to just be close to numbers and facts. However, when you work, you have to work with people. Understanding people, understanding culture, understanding where everybody comes from makes you more successful in your professional life. So I wouldn't change my background in classics. It was hard to get from classic to the first year at universities, but I wouldn't change that.
That's great. Thanks. There's a couple related questions here. I think it's Enos. Are you there, Enos Kudir? You had a question you posted? I might be pronouncing the name poorly.
Close enough.
Sorry.
So my question was, how would you describe the difference between working at a university, at a small business, and at a big company in terms of developing ideas? Which one did you find sort of gave way for the most innovation, or how did the innovation vary?
So I'm always impressed about the question of the high school students. I don't think I was so much more developed when I was in high school. So it's a very good question. And I use that knowledge every day when I work across this external collaboration. So at university, you want to do research. There are some fundamental research, there are some concepts, and you are fascinated with your research activity. Now, usually this goes out into a paper, a conference presentation, but the application of that research is only a goal for very few university professors. So usually at university, you want to publish. Your success as a professor is how many papers, how many papers you write. Sometimes it doesn't matter how important, how long, it's just how many did you write in which conference paper or in journals. In small business, the innovation has a goal, which is I want to innovate to be competitive and have a product that I can sell. So there is this middle way in the innovation. The nice thing about a small business is that because it's small, it's agile, is dynamic, and you know everybody in the company, even if it's small business usually is less than 500 people as a definition, which is not small, but that's the definition that we use. You know everybody and you can do things very quickly. The problem with the small business is that you have limited resources and it's a struggle to try to continue, and COVID-19 just told us how difficult that is. In a large corporation instead, you have a lot of resources. You have labs, you have expertise, you have expert in every possible field. Think about this system, 90,000 people around the world and all mostly engineers are expert in their field. However, because it's a large entity, there are a lot of processes. And so the rapidity of doing innovation is a challenge. And that's why in my particular role right now, I'm trying to collaborate with small business to leverage their rapidity and dynamic innovation with our resources. And that's the, using this innovation ecosystem model, things work very well. And then the last one is startup. So startup and small business are a little different. So a startup is an entity, it is a very exciting, to start a startup is really exciting, but it's full of risks. It's the riskiest thing that you can do. and you have to be able and willing to take up and downs, and failing, it might happen. And an important part is learning how to deal with venture capital investors. For me, that was a great experience to see how venture capital investors are not led by the innovation, by the dreams, the R&D. It's about money. They want a company, they put money in, and that can be profitable. So when you present to a VC, it doesn't matter about your technology. It's how much money are you gonna make and how often? And so it's a really different position. And but what I wanted to say is just as a putting this together is what I'm trying to do in my position right now is to try to connect all these different players in the ecosystem, because if we work all together, including the government that put all this money for contracts for research, we can be really successful as a innovation and grow the economy and ensure national security. Probably more than you wanted to ask, but
that was great. Mira Kumar, are you there? Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, actually, you already answered my original question, but I can just add to Inez's. What do you think was your favorite experience in working in these different areas? Like, do you have a favorite between like a small business versus a big company versus a startup? Or is there like a very memorable experience that you have?
So let's say every experience was, so let's see if I can unify the answer. So for each experience, I had to take a lot of risk in change. So when I left my position as a professor, moving to the US and not knowing if I was going to be successful and what it was my options were. Again, when I started a startup so what I think what excites me is when I start a new, something new, I put all my heart in it. And what I enjoy is the fact that it's hard. It's a challenge. So if you go to a job that it's already planned for you and you just fill it up and you do it, yeah, you just have to do what they tell you to do. For me, the exciting part is if I have a challenge, if I have something new that it was not planned, and you really make a difference in that institution. And so for me, it was when I work in small business, I made the difference because I brought a new field, which was antenna systems that they hadn't started yet. So a lot of new success in the field. Where I work in the startup, it was exciting to see how valuable my research was and how much it was valued in terms of money by the VCs. And now being a BAE system, for instance, the excitement for me is I started this position of Director of Tech Scouting in 2008. And I started this new innovation model that we didn't have before. So for me, it's been really exciting to be creative and coming up with something that made sense to me using all my experience and my background to try to develop this new rapid innovation model in defense that also support the commercial market. So every experience has, every step I did has a enjoyable experience, but in general, the connection between all those is to start something new that require creativity, determination, and really make an impact in that institution. So what I wanted to do everywhere I go, I want to make an impact and leave it better than it was when I was there.
Thank you.
Hey, Lisa, do we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions? We have a lot of questions, so for the students, I apologize. I'm not going to get to all of them.
We have until 2 p.m., Scott.
Okay, all right, great. Some more. How about Andrew? Andrew Zhao, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi,
yeah. So, hello. My question was, would you recommend going to grad school? Because I kind of like noticed the shift between, like doing a startup or going to a small company or just like maybe getting a PhD, and which one would you recommend? I guess kind of to maximize like your ability to do things.
Right. So do you remember, so in my slide, what I said was you have to decide not what you want to be, but what you want to do. What's the goal, right? So how do you want to make your difference in the society? So you make decision that allows you to do that. And so, for instance, if your goal is, I want to discover a cure for a disease, and that saves a lot of life. So of course you're gonna be a doctor, right? Or you're gonna be a scientist, and so you do all the steps that help you to get there, which can be not the traditional path. So for instance, I would say even if you do medicine, you should do math and probability, because that is always applied. Artificial intelligence, all apply to all the fields. If you want to save the planet and you say, I want to do climate science, and you want to make an impact, maybe you want to get into policy. So you study some atmospheric science and say, I want to apply to policy because I can impact the way decisions are made. And so then you can use that path. And so definitely in that case, you're not going to do a PhD, but you're going to get into some government institution, do internships to make that. So it's not that I didn't want to answer your question directly, but it really depends on your dream and what your impact that you want to make in society. And then you adjust it to that. So for instance, I'm going to ask, what's your dream? What is the impact you want to have in society?
You know, to be honest, I haven't really thought that far, but I guess just like obviously I'd hope to do something positive to kind of I guess make that tangible impact that you've been talking about. I'm not sure in what way, and I'm just really curious to learn as much as possible, and to see what I enjoy doing and see how I can help other people with that. So that's just
right,
jumping straight out of college, or going to be very specific and get a PhD or MD or MBA, whatever.
Right. So in this case, you say you don't have a dream that is clear, you don't have a passion, you don't know really what you want to do. And, in a way, it's really hard to predict what the jobs of the future will be. So they say 60% of the jobs that you're going to have or other generation will have don't exist yet. So how do you prepare for that? So what I always suggest is you cannot predict, but you should have a very well-rounded background. So definitely mathematics is important, physics is important, computer science, artificial intelligence. Those are things that you can apply in every field that you will be in. And then in those, insert also soft skills, so writing or psychology, because working with people is fundamental. So you can be the most brilliant person, but if you cannot impact people and influence people, you cannot really make a difference. And the only way you can impact and influence people is understanding where people come from and what are the motivations for them. So a lot of soft skills. So start with a very broad background, and then, it's like those fish bowls. You go to the first step, and then from there you see things that happen, you do control theory, see what happened around you, what happened to you as a person growing and maturing in your career, and then you make the next decision. I hope it helps.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that's a bit vague because I have absolutely no idea where I want to go. So
that was great. Thanks. I think maybe time for one more question. Alexi Panas, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Alexi.
Hi. So I have studied Italian language and culture for many years, and it has interested me for a long time. And recently, in my AP class, we learned that Italian youth, they face many struggles with unemployment. So I was curious, what kind of advice would you give them if they want to achieve something but they're struggling as a result of?
Specifically in Italy, you mean?
Yeah.
So I have my own vision about, so of course it's harder to find jobs in places where there is a small job availability, of course. However, you can always find a job. We have to be full of resources, new ideas, understand your market, understanding your own skills, and see what can you provide to that environment, the society, what is your role and how you can help. So I'm always convinced that there is always something you can do in a very creative way, that it's not a regular job sometimes because there are not so many regular jobs there. So creativity, new ideas, and understand what the needs are in the market, because if you feel a need, you always find a role. And that might be not what your dream was, but you can start one step at a time.
Great.
Thank you.
That was great, Francesca. I'm going to call Laurel and Olivia Ma right now to present the t-shirt. So Anne, are you there?
Thank you for the inspirational talk, and here virtually through the screen share, here's your t-shirt, and thank you.
Thank you for the shirt. I love it.
Olivia?
Yeah, just to add on, just wanted to say thank you for coming and being with us and sharing your life story. It was really like inspirational to see like your path going from like you know, growing up in Italy and then ending up at BAE. That was really cool, and like your path through the small businesses and startups. Yeah, and also just wanted to say thank you again to BAE for sending us these backpacks. They're super cool, and I was definitely really excited to get mine in the mail.
Thank you.